For the new persons that have joined to the YouTube live streaming, good night. My name is Kimberly Brown. I'm the group leader from Group 2. My group members is Alisa Samaru and as well as Keva. So the title for our presentation is The Potential Roles and Developments of Herbs in Pharmacology. So in our introduction, there are enormous development in herbal medicines with phytopharmaceuticals, as everybody is making their own medication. The pharmaceutical industry channels an important proportion of total research in most developed countries. However, large sections of the population in developing countries still rely on traditional practitioners and herbal medicines for their primary care. Herbal products do not fall under the category of medicine as long as they are not marketed for the prevention of any disease. Herbal drugs are considered as food integrators and readily available in the market without prescriptions. They are assumed to be natural, safe, and have fewer side effects than prescription drugs. Recent studies found that genetic variations show some influence on herb-drug interaction, where herbs used for medical reasons are now known as herbal medicinal products, known as HMPs, that belong to a main part of complementary and alternative medicines, or CAM camp. In this infographic, we will continue to cover some of the recent advances in the field of pharmaceutical sciences, the potential role of herbs and their health challenges. The WHO identified the importance of herbal medicines by proclaiming the potential role of including herbal products in managing diabetes and its related medical conditions. Because of the uniqueness of each herb, there is an implication that their use have not been properly assessed. It shows the importance for the need of identifying ways to create evidence-based validation of herbal medications through drug discovery and scientific validation. This stems from scientific discovery to efficient and effective ways to use these herbs. Scientific validation is done by standardization, evaluation of purity, and demonstration of its ability to produce the desired or intended result in repetitive tests, both animal and human, dependent on the drug or herb. The validation process has the potential to increase trust on the use of herbs due to the increased evidence level of safety, although the method of testing can be faced with ethical and rational challenges. There are various guidelines available for standardization of herbal medicines. Globally, each country has its own rules and regulations, which pose a challenge for it to become commercially recognized as a functioning drug, means for cultivation, transportation, storage, and distribution. For those who want the information on cannabis, for example, in Canada, you can walk into a particular store and you could just see a shelf of the cannabis available in packs or jars, while in Trinidad, before it was decriminalized, you have to go by a particular person to get access to the drug. But now, each adult could have 4 plants or 4 trees, right? But in Trinidad, they didn't get any classification to what kind of breed or what type of plant, how big the plant have to be, etc. Just how much you could have off the tree and how much trees you can have, right? So on to health challenges. A challenge related to the usage of traditional remedies, which includes herbs, increases health risk when used with conventional medicine. Here, it is now ineffective in the treatment of diseases, such as in advanced cancer and in the face of new infectious diseases, such as COVID. You don't hear anyone coming forward and saying, well, you could drink pawpaw leaf and it could help with the COVID, or drink some sauce-up leaves with the bark and it will help you with the COVID. No, right? So for example, ginkgo biloba, used to treat altitude sickness or prevention of altitude sickness, dementia, dizziness or vertigo, glaucoma, and memory loss. When taken with fish oil supplements, ibuprofen, naproxen, aspirin or other prescription medications, where these medications are all blood thinners. Ginkgo biloba slows blood clotting and may increase internal bleeding. The validation process includes standardization of herbs, which is the confirmation of its identity, quality, and purity throughout all phases of its cycle. That is like shelf life, storage, distribution, and use by various parameters where there can be some shortfalls. I think another good information as it just pops into my head, in terms of identity, a joke between me and my dad, I used to see the cassava plant, right? There's a cassava plant and there's the okra plant. If you look at the leaves, the shape and the formation of the leaf is so similar to marijuana or cannabis leaf, So someone who don't have the information in terms of how to identify the drug versus comparing it to a different plant, you don't want them to come and pick maybe the leaf for cassava tree or okra tree and use it to say, well, this is cannabis, this will help with this and that. We know cassava has cyanide in it, which is poisonous. So this is why identifying the herb is very important, right? So for example, toxic residues may arise in crude drugs as a result of pesticide application and fumigation during cultivation and storage. This can result in poisoning or related diseases such as leukemia, lipoma, and cancers of the brain, breast, prostate, testes, and ovaries. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, my dad, who was a farmer, was diagnosed with prostate cancer last year. And he used to use a lot of pesticides on his crops. And he never used to wear PPE or protective gear a lot. And that actually led to prostate cancer, right? I'll also link it to the use of cannabis and how he used cannabis to help him, right? So I'm making this presentation more for the cannabis watchers, right? So the use of large size materials in drug delivery poses major challenges, including instability, poor bioavailability, poor solubility, poor absorption in the body, issues with target specific delivery, and tonic effectiveness. So as they mentioned, Paho mentioned in terms of the COVID vaccine, I have learned where I work, which is the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber, where the government of Trinidad and Tobago has already pre-ordered the COVID vaccines, but we have to ensure that we have everything in place before it can come here and start for distribution, because it has to stay in storage in I think it's below freezing temperatures. So to transport it from abroad to here will pose a challenge. In terms of marijuana and stuff, a lot of people tend to have it maybe in a Ziploc bag. Some people might have it in foil. Some people may have it, as in Canada, they have it in the jars, as well as some plastic bottles. It all depends on how you're using it. Some people use the like to mix it with other medication, which is not a good thing. But yeah, so that kind of goes back to the example with the ginkgo biloba, where it could also create other adverse effects in patients. So onto the cannabis. Research has showed that the use of herbs can become abusive, resulting in long-term adverse effects coupled with social and political factors. This is why cannabis has been banned in most countries. A recent systematic review evaluated published studies of the acute and long-term cognitive effects of cannabis. THC intoxication is well established to impair cognitive functioning on an acute basis, including effects on the ability to plan, organize, solve problems, make decisions, and control impulses. Now, we would know that there will be some users of this drug who would beg to differ, who would assume that the increased use of cannabis tend to open their minds, make them think more within a short period of the use. But after people tend to use cannabis, they get hungry, they become agitated at some time. So it all depends on how you use it and whether or not, as we like to say, how your body could take it. Cannabis-based drugs that claim therapeutic effects must go through the same lengthy FDA approval process as other drugs, including clinical trials for safety and efficacy. In our research, we found out that in terms of clinical trials, dependent on the use of drugs, herbal or commercially available drugs, clinical trials tend to take more than 5 years, because when it comes to science, you have to make sure that you get um, the effect or the result that you want more than once. That is how you know it's reliable. The result is reliable and valid. So selecting the right test subjects per se, whether it's animals, whether it's humans, and then of course facing with the ethical and the political factors that I mentioned above in terms of animal rights groups, um, in terms of persons who's willing to, let's say, sell themselves for science. There are some groups in society that are against clinical trials, and all of that is why some challenges is another challenge for validating drugs. So now our last section, is combating challenges. The regulations and methods of validating herbs and herbal drugs manufacturing should require that herbs or herbal products be produced with a high degree of assurance of meeting all the attributes they are intended to possess. Clinical validation should involve principles of clinical repetitive trials. Effective process validation contributes significantly to assuring drug quality. FDA has the authority and responsibility to inspect and evaluate process validation, which should be considered on the use of herbal drugs. But since this is mostly done on commercial drugs, policy to be placed on what we call bush medicine should be looked into. And final comments, plant-based drugs awareness can set a foundation for many traditional medicine systems around the globe. For example, the increased use of herbs such as ginseng extract and turmeric. And as I mentioned before, a lot of these types of ingredients tend to become commercialized, not just in medicinal products, but as well as commercial products. So you have, like, for example, Carib produces ginseng up. Some drugstores, you could just go and get the ginseng extract off the shelf without any prescription. Sometimes some people take 1 or 2 vials per day. How well are you? How much are you taking it? Are you taking it with any other medication? Right? And turmeric, as I mentioned before as well, Rituals came out last year with their turmeric flavored smoothie. A lot of people also tend to have turmeric growing in their yard. In Trinidad, we call it saffron, and that's a kind of a staple available to most people. And there are also other products that we can also look at as well, because I understand, like, from experience with my dad, there was this drug that he used to take. A lot of people have this plant in the air, but I forgot the name, which I can remember, just slipped my mind. Right, but finally, WHO has reported recently that 80% of the Earth's population rely on traditional medication for their primary healthcare needs, and most of its therapy involves the use of plant extracts and their active components. Therefore, support is also needed to manage the cost of commercially available drugs. So, as well as life-saving drugs, they tend to be, especially in developing countries, they tend to be very expensive. So people, especially in cultural aspect, indigenous people tend to stray away from commercially available drugs because they may have the belief that commercial drugs may make any particular sickness that they have worse. So they always rely on all reliable bush medicine, right? Some people who have cancer believe in the soursop leaf. People who are the cold, they believe in Panada, they believe in boiling the pawpaw leaf, So it all ties into as well with cultural aspect. As I know, like, when I visited Jamaica last year, to be honest, there are hardly a lot of drugstores. When it is you ask a local what do they take in terms of for medication or any sickness. The herb, right? So it's all about cultural aspect, because they also have leaders or cultural influences like Bob Marley, who believed in taking the um, particular cannabis for use for anything, for knowledge. That what he used. They thought that the cannabis contributed to how his creativity and everything. So that is why a lot of awareness needs to be made on particular herbs, especially the popular one like cannabis. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation, and that is it from Group 2.